Russia is losing its edge in the global arms market. The last 3 years have been tough. Moscow's weapon exports have collapsed.
In 2021, Russia earned about $14.6 billion by selling weapons to other countries. But everything changed in 2022. That February, Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly, countries around the world started to rethink doing business with Moscow. By the end of 2022, Russia's arms exports had dropped to $8 billion, nearly half of what it was the year before. And in 2023, Russia's arms exports dropped again, this time down to $3 billion. Then in 2024, things got even worse. Russia earned less than $1 billion from weapon sales. That's a 92% drop in just 3 years. For every $14 it made in 2021, it was only making $1 by 2024. That kind of loss is a huge problem for Russia. Arms sales help pay for its military, including the war in Ukraine. Less money means fewer resources for building weapons, training troops, and replacing what's lost in combat. It's also a big blow to Russia's global power and influence. So, what caused this massive collapse? At first, it might seem obvious. Russia's weapons simply didn't perform well in Ukraine. Tanks got destroyed by drones, planes were shot down, artillery was often inaccurate or outmatched. That kind of failure scared off potential buyers. But performance problems aren't the whole story. Even though Russian weapons didn't do well in battle, most countries didn't say that's why they stopped buying. In fact, the real reasons are a mix of politics, pressure, and priorities. Let's break it down. From 2020 to 2024, Russia sold weapons to at least 33 different countries. India was the largest customer. China, Kazakhstan, Algeria, Belarus, Egypt, and Myanmar, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, the UAE, Nigeria, Cambodia, Thailand, Mongolia, and Rwanda. But by 2024, that list had shrunk. Those were India, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Myanmar, Mali, and Gabon. So, what scared off the rest? One major reason was the war in Ukraine. Russia needed more weapons for itself, so it had fewer to sell. Another problem was trade sanctions. After the invasion, the US, the EU, and other allies placed thousands of sanctions on Russian companies and people. These sanctions made it harder for Russia to build and ship weapons. There's also the role of American pressure. Back in 2017, US President Donald Trump signed a law called CAATSA, the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This law punishes countries that buy weapons from Russia, Iran, or North Korea. That made many countries afraid to do business with Russia. Even back in 2019, Indonesia cancelled a big deal to buy Russian fighter jets because of CAATSA. Since the Ukraine war started, US pressure has only grown. Countries that keep buying Russian weapons risk losing access to American tech, financial help, or military support. For many, it's just not worth the risk. India, for example, still bought some parts in 2024, like engines for its jets. But even those engines are made in India under license, and the deliveries are spread over many years. Another thing to consider is the natural arms cycle. Countries don't buy tanks, jets, or missiles every year. They often make one big purchase, then wait a long time before buying again. So some countries might not be buying now simply because they already have what they need. But the biggest reason for the collapse in exports is simple. Russia needs almost everything it makes for its own war. And it's not just Russia. Ukraine used to be a major weapons exporter too. In 2019, it ranked 12th in the world. But by 2024, it had dropped to 20th. Now, Ukraine is focused on building weapons for its own army. It wants to produce $35 billion worth of weapons each year, especially drones and artillery. But even that hasn't been enough. Between 2020 and 2024, Ukraine became the biggest arms importer in the world. It took in 8.8% of all global arms imports. That's more than 100 times what it imported from 2015 to 2019. And that's not counting billions in economic aid. So both Russia and Ukraine have stopped focusing on exports, because both are busy arming themselves. A good example is Iran. In 2022, it ordered 25 Russian Su-35 fighter jets, but by 2024, only 2 had been delivered. Russia was keeping the rest for its own air force. To keep up with the war, Russia has massively increased production. In early 2024, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said tank output was 6 times higher than before, drone production was 17 times higher, artillery shells were being made 17.5 times faster. Later in the year, Russian official Denis Manturov added that combat aircraft and armored vehicle production was up 2.5 times. Some artillery production lines had increased 15 times. NATO and US officials are extremely worried. In February 2025, NATO's Mark Rutte said Russia now produces more ammo in 3 months than all 32 NATO countries make in a year. US General Christopher Cavoli said Russia is building 250,000 artillery shells every month, 3 times more than the US and Europe combined. Russia might also be making up to 1,500 tanks a year. For comparison, the US only makes about 135. Even though Russia has lost thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, and air defense systems in Ukraine, it's replacing them quickly. How is this possible? It's because Russia has fully shifted into a war economy. Before the war, most of Russia's 6,000 defense companies didn't make much money, but they had factories and workers that weren't being used at full capacity. Putin changed that. By late 2022, Russia expected a long war. So the government took control of many factories. Big defense companies like Rostec were put in charge. Gunpowder factories, like the one in Kazan, started hiring lots of workers, offering higher pay. By early 2024, Putin said 520,000 new jobs had been created in the military industry. That sector now employs 3.5 million Russians, about 2.5% of the population. Russia now spends about 1/3 of its entire economy on defense. Ukraine spends even more, close to 100%. But Russia's spending is still massive, and it's growing. Tank factories like Uralvagonzavod and Omsk Transmash were busier in 2024 than in 2023. Other cities like Arzamas, Kurgan, and Yekaterinburg also saw factory booms. Missile plants like Titan Barricadi and Splav were producing non-stop. Even the Alabuga drone plant, which was hit by Ukrainian drones, kept operating. A lot of what's being made is old Soviet gear, fixed up with modern parts. For example, T-72 tanks are being upgraded. Old bombs are being turned into smart bombs. Outdated artillery is being fitted with modern targeting systems. But Russia isn't just reusing old gear, it's building new weapons too. This war is changing how battles are fought. There are fewer traditional tank fights and more drone attacks. Electronic warfare, AI, and stealth are more important than ever. In some cases, cheap weapons are beating expensive ones. The Houthis in Yemen shot down $30 million drones with low-cost missiles. Ukraine has used 4 million Patriots to destroy 30,000 Russian drones. Even heavily armored vehicles like the US Bradley can be destroyed by cheap drones. That's why every country, including Russia, Ukraine, China, and NATO, is racing to catch up. Russia may have a head start. It's testing new weapons in real battles. Western countries are more cautious and don't want to risk their best tech. And now, Russia is already trying to sell these new, combat-tested weapons. At its 2025 Victory Day parade, Russia showed off upgraded tanks with drone defenses, electronic jammers, and extra armor. Other new systems included K-52 helicopters, stealth drones like the Supercam S-350M, unmanned scout vehicles, new loitering drones, and tools that block enemy drones or locate satellite signals. Russian officials say many countries are interested in buying. At least 13 countries, including Qatar, Egypt, Morocco, Vietnam, and Iraq, are looking at the S-400 missile system, which costs around $500 million. Russia's arms export agency says it's talking to over 100 buyers for projects worth a total of $30 billion. Could this be an exaggeration? Maybe. But maybe not. In April 2025, Russia said future arms deals will focus on joint production. That means the weapons will be built in the buyer's country. This helps Russia avoid sanctions and builds closer ties with foreign governments. In fact, Putin said back in 2023 that Russia had 40 joint production deals with African countries. India already builds its own Su-30 jets using Russian parts. Egypt may soon start building Russian tanks. This matters for the West. If the war ends and Russia still has a huge military industry, it will likely start selling weapons again, and fast. That means more money and more influence for Moscow. Russia builds weapons much cheaper than the US. It can sell them across Africa, Asia, and Latin America at prices Western countries can't match. And by building weapons abroad, Russia can also gain political power in those countries. This has already happened in parts of Africa. In the Sahel region, France lost access to gold and uranium mines as Russia gained more influence. That's a warning for the US and Europe. Western arms makers need to act quickly. They may have better technology, but it has to be ready and affordable if they want to compete with Russia. So what's next? Is the Russian arms industry collapsing or planning a big comeback? Let us know in the comments. And thanks for watching.